So we've tagged the ear, we've given our tetanus antitoxin. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to dock the tail. Now, why dock the tail as opposed to not docking the tail? The whole purpose of docking the tail, specifically on animals that have wool, notice we've got a wool sheep here, we do not have a hair sheep. The whole point of docking the tail is to prevent fly strike. Fly strike is when feces get built up on the animal's tail, flies come along, lay eggs in the wool, and can develop maggots. The maggots will then burrow into the skin and actually cause infection and can kill an animal. So the idea is to dock the tail to keep it clean and to keep less maintenance on the animal. That was the original idea behind docking tails. Now, if you go to shows nowadays, you'll see that the tail has been completely removed. It's been surgically removed and it's all the way up to the bottom of the animal. We don't do that here at our farm. If you're going to dock a tail all the way up against an animal, I suggest that you talk to your veterinarian and have that performed as a surgical procedure. Not something that you should do at your farm. The reason for that is if you dock the tail too close, you can damage some tendons. You can also set the animal up for having prolapse. So we don't do that. Now, we do dock our tails close, but we don't dock them too close. Traditionally, places like New Zealand, years ago here in the States, the tail used to be docked a little bit longer. Ideally, the tail should be long enough to cover the vulva. That's the thought process. So if you were to go to New Zealand or even some traditional farms here in the States now, you would see that the tail is docked a little bit longer and it actually covers the vulva. We tend to dock ours a little bit closer. If you look at the inside of the tail, you'll see that there is some skin. Ideally, I'm going to remove some of this poop. Ideally, you want to dock right at the point where the wool stops and the skin begins. That's a traditional docking position. And if you see, if I hold my finger there, right where the skin stops and the wool starts, that is just perfectly long enough to cover the vulva. We are going to dock slightly closer, probably somewhere in the middle. Now, we're going to cut today, but you can use a banding tool. To give you an idea of the banding tool and how that would go, our little banding donut here is going to go onto our banding tool. We would stretch it out, take the tail, pull it through, get it up in position, and then let it go and roll the band off. Again, the tail would become necrotic, and after a few weeks it would fall off. We're not going to do that today. We're actually going to cut the tail. So in this case, as we talked about earlier, we have a cutting side of this tool and we have an anvil side of the tool. The anvil side is what's going to crush the arteries. The cutting side is actually what's going to cut. The tail would be placed through the tool, held firmly with one hand and crushed and crimped with the other. Again, when you crush, you want to make sure that you hold it in place for at least 10 seconds afterwards, and that's going to make sure that any arteries actually get appropriately crimped off and it prevents bleeding. I don't have any blood stop powder with me out here today, but it is something that you want to make sure that you have close by. I actually have it just a few feet away in my tack box. If I were to uncrimp the tail and it was, having excessive bleeding, I could go ahead and apply blood stop powder at that time. So, again, just like when we dock the ears, when we tag the ears, you want to make sure that once you're vested in this, once you start, you're going to go and you're going to get it done. You can't do this halfway and then stop. Now, as you can see, Jocelyn has this lamb in position. She's holding her down low where I can get to her, and she's holding the leg up. She's got a nice firm grip on the animal. That's going to cause less stress on the lamb, and it's going to stop any potential damage from happening from the animal moving around So I get it in place and squeeze and hold. The tail's been cut, as you can see. I'm going to hold for at least 10 seconds. More is better. You could, if you're in a big hurry and you unclamp this too fast, you're going to set yourself up for causing bleeding on the animal. Okay. Okay. We got a little bit of bleeding, but nothing major. I'm going to spray some antiseptic spray on the tail. And we're good to go.